Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Greet the Week. I am Mona Duncan, and my co host is Jan Moray. And we are here with some topics that we bring up, and we just kind of talk, banter back and forth, getting insights from each other. And so today's topic is on feelings and where do they come from, and what do we do with them? And if it's our own original feeling, uh, do we have the right to disavow it, or do we act on it just because it was our feeling, as opposed to maybe it was something that is a warning? And so Jan's saying that she sees emotions as just being an invitation, some kind of information. So Jan, what's your thoughts on feelings?
Well, I've thought about this for quite a long time because I am one of these people who cry at everything. And it's very frustrating because it's like, I don't feel sad, or yes, I'm feeling happy, but I don't want these tears to, I don't like these tears when I'm happy. Um, and, so sometimes the feelings are different from what I think I'm thinking. and so I'm going with it. This doesn't match with me. And so should I act out on how I'm feeling? Should I listen to those feelings, or should I think it through a little bit more? And the one example that really got me to start thinking of this was 30 years ago now, because my son's 30, was when he was a little baby, and my mother wanted to keep him for a few days. We had just gone to visit them, and she's just like, "Oh, can I keep him for a few days?" And I didn't really like that she asked me that, but I was like, well, okay. I'm going back to work, and so he's going to be going to daycare anyway, so why not let him stay with his grandmother and bond a little with his grandmother? But I just started crying. I was truly okay with it, and I said, yes, you can keep him for a few days. We'll be back. Or she said they'll drive back to Austin and bring him back in a few days. And then when mother saw me cry, she's like, "Oh, no, I don't want to take your baby away from you. You take you take your baby back." And I'm sorry I asked. And I was like, "No, Mom, I'm really okay with this. I'm crying." And I really was thinking, why are these tears coming down from my eyes, and why am I crying so much about this? Because I really was okay with it. But then, thinking a little bit more about it, there's more to the thinking just with my being okay with it. I had some other thinking going on that I was going to lose my baby, and I really didn't want to part with my baby. And but I think we get to have those examples in our life fairly often, where our emotions just don't seem to make sense with what's happening around us. And so do we act out on the emotions, or do we stop and think about it? And I just wanted to find out if anybody else has experienced that, and what kind of things do you do?
Well, I think a whole lot we need to look at the parts of our brain and the parts of our being as a whole to kind of see what all is working together. Because, in one, there is everything. And we are male and female. We are good and evil. We are righteous and unrighteous. I mean, we're just all of those things together. So you are mother, parent, protective, as well as generous and sharing. And so sometimes it's hard to tease those two apart. And as we begin to look at, someone made the comment of calling it reality therapy or choice theory for the soul. And I love that. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that, because we as human beings, we mix up the ego with the soul. Now, the soul is that part of us that's the better part of us. It's the part that wants to nurture, that wants to be civil, that wants to be sane, that wants to be moral. But then we have our ego, and our ego is something that we have made up on our own. But the thing of it is we don't know that. Or rarely ever do we know that. We have to really be aware of the fact that that was something that we decided, that ego, that as we begin to see life and look at life, and I want to be this, and I want to be that, and I want to have this, and I want to have that, we begin to adopt other things as our personality that's not necessarily who we really are. And these things can get all mixed up and get our emotions all mixed up. And so I like to look at maybe 3 questions we can ask ourselves when we're overly emotional and don't want to be. And whether that is crying or angering or pushing away, just, isolating, whatever it might be, is one, to look at your decisions as a whole rather than, look at some of the isolated ones, maybe that one in particular, but some others. And did you do something that you later regretted? And if so, initially think back, was there any doubts? Whenever mom wanted to take the child home, was there initially any doubts that said, no, 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 don't let her take her. She would not be as loving and kind as you are?
No, I don't think that was the case.
Yeah, probably not. So if there wasn't any initial doubts, then why did we override them? And the thing of it is although your emotions kind of was overriding that, oh no, that's my baby and I want to take care of it. Who knows? He may start walking and I want to be there when he walks or talks. So if we have been, often when we have overridden something, we look back and we ask ourselves, well, why did I override it? What was my soul really trying to tell me that was neat? It was something that would have been better for the whole had I said yes to it as opposed to rejecting it.
And so by overriding, you meant that I was just ignoring the tears.
Talk yourself out of it. And then also, it's to sometimes look at and really self-evaluate, am I seeking comfort or am I trying to relieve pain? In the decisions that we make and the ones that are there, and we don't know what decision to make. Am I seeking comfort? If I go ahead and eat this bowl of ice cream, will it really relieve the pain of having missed the deadline? Mm-hmm. Or is it just a temporary comfort to try to get back on track?
Yeah, well, I think with the ice cream, it's a temporary comfort.
And then also it's looking at when our emotions are so confusing is, am I trying to live someone else's life? Am I overriding what my own wisdom heart is telling me because I'm wanting to be something I'm not? And kind of look at it and go with it from there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. In that particular example that I gave, it's, at first I didn't really, like I said, I didn't really like it that she asked to keep him. But after I thought about it, I said, well, she's entitled to spend some time with her grandson. And that was the first grandchild. and she waited a long time to have a grandchild. And, but I can remember too, just leaving people in general. Like I said, I cried at the drop of a hat, and leaving people that I haven't seen and that I know I'm not going to see in a long time. The tears come out too. So there's that sadness that goes with just the parting of ways that is just something inside of me. And I guess some people could look at it as it's a compliment to them that I care a lot about them, that the tears appear like that. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't leave, and I'm not going to leave, and I'm going to stay. Well, I'm going to stay here forever and stay and visit you, because every time I go, I cry. It's not that doesn't work, because we have to go back to our lives. We have to go back to doing what we always do, but the emotions are there. And I think emotions need to be listened to, and like leaving somebody else when somebody's crying when they're leaving that is a huge compliment. Wow, you care so much for me that it is an emotional event for us to part ways. And then if I quit crying when you leave, then maybe you should question, uh-oh, are you not feeling the same way about me?
Right, exactly. Sometimes we think that other people are thinking maybe what we're thinking. And so if we're thinking it's a term of really endearment and how much they are sad over our departure, whereas, it just may be something entirely different from the other person. So
Yeah.
we have to question our own or look at them and see if there's not as much or more to it than we're looking at.
Yeah.
And back to the ego and the soul, the ego pretty much is serving self, whereas the soul is also serving self, taking care, doing what is nurturing and good for you, but it is also looking for the benefit of others. And so, yes, grandma loves this child and wants to be a part of their life. And so looking at it from, wanting to love the child yourself, it's also wanting to share the child so that others can love and have an imprint on their life. The ego has a tendency to believe the worst, either about self or even about others. Whereas the soul, that deep down inside gut wisdom heart, is saying everything's going to be okay. It doesn't mean there won't be pain, doesn't mean there won't be discomfort, doesn't mean there won't be, that everything's going to be okay. It'll all work out.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you have to act out on that emotion. I mean, it's there to tell you something, but it doesn't mean that you have to act out on it. I mean, just because you're crying doesn't mean that you shouldn't leave. Just because you're angry doesn't mean that you should punch the person in the face.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, there's something else going on there. So let's try to understand what's happening there instead of reacting to the feeling. Because a lot of times when we feel a certain way, we believe that we need to act out on whatever it is that we're feeling.
Yeah. Well, and with the ego, nothing is ever enough. It's just more, Whereas the soul or the wisdom heart is saying that there's meaning in everything. And although I want to be nurturing with my child, I also want the grandmother to be nurturing with the child. Yeah. And, it's looking at, it's always wanting to go for the good of, if there's a division point, I always go for kindness as opposed to cruelty. I want to go for life as opposed to death. I want to go for civility as opposed to anger. Beginning to look at what is the highest form that we can go to.
Yeah. Sue made a comment here. I'm not sure if everybody saw it, saying that tears don't impact or influence others as anger might. Sue, do you want to comment any more about what you've written there?
Well, just as you were talking about feelings and the fact that some people will cry more easily, I'm just wondering if the same could be attributed for people who might get angry more quickly, or who might get frightened more quickly. And I'm just wondering that, do tears influence people in the same way as anger might?
Well, for me, the tears, I get upset at myself for having the tears because it's just embarrassing, and as a culture, we don't feel comfortable around tears, but I don't think it's as I'm trying to get anybody to do anything. Like, I really wasn't trying to get my mother to back down and say, no, I won't take the baby. Where I think with anger, a lot of times when we're angry, we do want the other person to do something different or do what we want.
Yeah.
Well, since we go for things that seems to work for us, sometimes if it works, even though it's working against us, if we think it's working for us, if I throw a tantrum because I want a cookie and I get a cookie, I may keep throwing tantrums.
Yeah.
Until something happens that, someone is gracious enough not give in to the tantrum. Well, it can be the same thing, whether it is being tears, whether it is being extremely kind, whether it is being angry. I mean, anything can be used as a ploy.
Mm. Yeah, well,
And
certainly it
we
can.
think it's effective and it gives us what we think we're wanting, we have a tendency to use it again and again.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, though, to what extent there are certain emotions that are more easily, for lack of a better way of saying it, triggered. You know, and it says, do we have as much control over those emotions, those feelings? You know, so when Jan's saying, you know, oh, I'm going to cry. I don't want to cry. I don't like crying. I'd rather not cry. You know, and to what degree then there's people who just anger more quickly, you know, and can that be more easily controlled or not as easily controlled? You know, I don't know if there's a difference in the different types of emotions. And I mean, I understand, Mona, when you're talking about that, are there some emotions that, yeah, it's a ploy. I'm just doing this because, and I know it and I have very good control over it. That's different than, oh no, I don't want to cry. You know? I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be frustrated. You know, to what degree is it different feelings, emotions are more easily triggered or less easily triggered?
Well, you know, Dr. Glasser in the book on fibromyalgia talks about the fact that how that our emotions become our physiology. And if we can change our mind about a lot of things, we can also change our physiology. And I find for myself personally, I have learned to not perspire as much, to stay cool, to stay calm. I have learned, well, and as someone that had, and in discussing it with Dr. Glasser, he was talking about, well, he was talking particularly, he kind of likened it to arthritis, that, you know, and I'm thinking, well, as a matter of fact, I even speak up and say, are you telling me that you give yourself arthritis? And of course, his comment is that you don't deliberately give it to you, but because of your emotions and how you keep them going, they turn into those kind of things. Trying to get us to wake up and see, you know, what is the purpose of anger? It's to make noise so we'll know when something's going wrong. Anyway, I began to think about that. I began to really think about that and listen to my own wisdom heart. And the fact that I wanted to, you know, thinking about my own anger, was I eating it? I mean, I was certainly spewing it out, but was I also eating it? And that I did not want to harm myself, but neither did I want to harm others. And as I became aware of that, I could begin to take control over it. And with the arthritis, I mean, I come from lineage, even my maternal grandmother was crippled with arthritis. And it was already beginning to set up in my body and showing it. And I mean, I'm just pretty sure I'm arthritis free. I haven't had any pains or aches, or there's just so many things that we do have more control over, that we just give it to an emotion and don't even think about it. I know sometimes I wonder, you know, how hot would you be if you didn't know the temperature? How cold would you be if you didn't know what temperature it was? We didn't have all those ready things to just tell us what it is and someone else to gauge us by. And it goes back to the question, are we trying to live someone else's life? Sometimes we're living up to or living down to what's been spoken into us.
So how, I mean, so like when you said you were able to stop perspiring, I mean, what do you do? You change what you're thinking?
I began to change what I was thinking. I began to change that, you know, and a lot of it was being anxious. And so I would think things through, and I would begin to just sit and calm and think about a pleasant scene. And it took a while. It took a couple of years.
Because of the crying thing, you know, I know I do it, and I just tell people just ignore it. When the tears start, I'm just going to act like I'm not even crying. I'm just going to keep going. But I have not figured out a way to get them to stop. And then I mentioned, you know, last week that my son just got married, and I gave the toast for him. And I knew I was going to cry. And you know, when I was talking at the introduction that I gave, I said, I'm going to start crying. I know I am. Maybe that was my problem. I said, I know I am. But then when I do, I'm just going to keep talking through it, which I did. And I mean, it worked out just fine. There's a lot of other people crying besides me there, so that was good.
So if it's a group of you, say okay.
That's right. but I still just act like I'm not. Act like everything's going okay, and my husband's gotten to the point now where he'll look at me and he goes, "So are those happy tears?" I said, "Yes, they're happy tears." I said, "Okay." And we just don't.
You know, they tell us that happy tears and sad tears have a different thought compound to them.
Yeah.
That maybe, you know, it may be a sad tear and you say it's a happy tear, but the chemistry of our body knows the difference.
So somebody can tell on me. Like, I can get a sample of my tear and analyze it, huh?
Yes. The thing of it is none of us are that good at understanding where we're coming from, let alone trying to understand where someone else is coming from, as to whether that's a happy or a sad.
I see we have another comment in the chat from Keisha. She says she feels angry when she's been violated in an egregious way, and
yes,
I would think that if somebody is not treating you very well, that I can understand the anger.
I was going to just make the comment that over the years I learned a little quick formula that has helped me immensely, and it's an I feel statement. I've been married for 26 years, and since I learned this, my marriage has gone much better. And it's just where I say what my feeling is. I feel when, and I give the reason. And because I go deeper into that, this is what happened here and what I want. So with anger, with general relationships, I don't ever express that in a way that's demeaning or diminishing. But over the past few years, I've noticed that a lot of people in this world can be very mean-spirited. And you do have to kind of set those boundaries. What I won't do is go back and forth and argue, but I will let someone know, you know, I feel violated when you speak to me that way. This is an example of the I feel statement. I feel violated when you speak to me in that way because I'm not speaking to you that way. And what I want is for us to talk with mutual respect in mind. So I do think that sometimes we kind of stuff anger and we make anger wrong. But there are times when you have to acknowledge that anger is an emotion that lets you know that somebody has violated you, or perhaps you're violating yourself by allowing things that don't really center itself on your core values and beliefs. So anger is one of those emotions that I often see people make bad or wrong. And many of the people in my family that I see who've gotten sick by stuffing things and not being honest about things were people who believed that you shouldn't be angry or you shouldn't say anything when you feel violated. And I just kind of disagree with that. And I wanted to just hear what your thoughts are on the anger emotion and when it's appropriate and how you should handle it.
Well, definitely speak up.
Yeah.
You know, it's called being assertive.
Yeah.
Assertive is setting a boundary. It's having a respect for you. Here's a boundary and you're not crossing it. Being firm yet kind. It's speaking it firmly, but being kind, and kindness shows respect to the person you're setting that boundary for.
It's because stuffing your feelings and acting like it's not there, it's going to come up somewhere else. I mean, you talk about the physiology part. When you pretend like you're not angry or just say, I don't want to get mad. It's not, I shouldn't, the whole should word, I shouldn't get mad. I mean, you're just asking for some health problems by bringing that stuff up. And it's going to come out somewhere else. Then you're going to end up, blowing up at your child or something because all this anger has been building up inside of you. And the last straw is when they, spill their milk or whatever. And you blow up at them. And then you're like, no, where'd this anger come from? From hiding it, pretending like it's not there and not addressing the areas that really need to be addressed.
Yeah, that anger does not go away. It will stay there until it erupts. And as long as we can think about it, even as you can think through, what can I say? What could I have said? What will I say? And have some kind of a dialogue so that you are speaking your truth in a non-angry way. Assertive
Yes.
doesn't mean that you may raise your voice, but you don't have to yell. Can be there still can be respect in the voice, even though you're setting a boundary. And always realize that the other person may not receive it. And so I will continue to have high regard for you as a human being, yes or no, but you're not crossing this boundary as far as I'm concerned.
You just send me something that doesn't make sense.
I'm not answering those things. I'm not.
I really received your feedback, and thank you.
Yeah. And then Sue brings up the question of, whether whatever you're saying is bringing you closer together or further apart. And I think that goes with the way you say it, the way you assert yourself. I mean, when you use the I statement, I don't like it. I feel angry when you say that. And it's really just providing the other person information. And so if it's done in a caring, in a sensitive way, then that it doesn't push you apart. Maybe it doesn't bring you together, but it doesn't push you apart. Just lets them know and opens up the dialogue back and forth. Because if somebody thinks that there's nothing wrong with the way they're treating you, and you're like, I don't like this, then there's obviously some other discussion that needs to go on in the relationship that will. How should I look at this then when you're yelling at me or when you're hitting me? If you think that's normal, that's to be accepted. Enlighten me. Tell me what I'm missing here.
Well, beginning to do things that brings you closer together will be in baby steps initially, until they can begin to be received on both points, the person giving it as well as the person receiving it. The thing of it is, bottom line, we always want to get to the bottom line. There can be a lot of pluses, minuses, divisions, multipliers, but we got to get down to the bottom line. And the bottom line is, no matter how someone else says something to me, what they're saying and or the manner in which they are saying it does not. I do have control over how I receive it. Mm-hmm. And I can receive it only as information. I can receive it that seeing the anger in them. I can receive it in a way that doesn't fuel my reacting to it as opposed to responding to it. See, all we can do is receive or give information. How are we receiving it? Now, we may be receiving it, yeah. We may be receiving it, no. We may be receiving it in ways that is real off-putting. And the bottom line is, we do have some control over how we receive something. And the way we can then give information back, we'll begin to, in a baby step way of, if someone is chasing you down the aisle because you want to listen to what I'm saying, and that can lead to a very volatile situation. Sometimes just stopping and listening to what they're saying. And then when it is time, when you can possibly be safe, even if it's having to call the police, okay? Have someone to step in. Then there's a time that, you may be calling me those things, but I'm not answering them. I'm not answering to it because that's not who I am. I'm not allowing that anymore. I'm not receiving that anymore. And sometimes it can help the other person to say, whoa, maybe I really am out of line here.
Yeah, sometimes when you repeat back what the person said to you, they hear it differently than when it came out of their mouth. Because I've done that to people before, where I'll repeat back, when you said this, da 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 da, I felt uneasy, and they're like, oh, the way you said it, it does sound kind of creepy. It's like, okay, yes.
But until that relationship has some little bit of bonding there, a little bit of more strengthening there, it's going to be a rebuke. No, I didn't say that. That's not what I meant.
That's not what I
It's
meant.
going to be some kind of a comeback. That's more of a keeping an argument going as opposed to kind of settling it. And so there's sometimes there just has to be that time where you can say, I'm not talking about this anymore. At least not now. Whenever we take a time out, whenever we can come to some kind of a listening to, because those I feel when you, because those are very, very powerful, but they don't work instantly. And it has to be continued working on the person that is learning to be assertive, firm yet kind, as well as the person that is learning to be treated in an assertive manner.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an important point, because just because you say something one time, the other person may not get it
exactly
that one time. And that doesn't mean that it's not working. It's just, sometimes we just need to hear things multiple times before it finally sinks in and we do something different.
And whether it's coaching or counseling, the thing of it is that the real coaching, the real counseling takes place after the session.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're just talking to your child or talking to your mate or talking to whomever, just the fact that you said something, have the courage to, and always be careful yourself as to how it comes out. That it's not a yeah.
Yeah.
That is some information. Because we do have control over how we give that.
Absolutely.
And, then give time to think about it. Sometimes we have to give time for things to sink down into the wisdom heart, to sink down into
we have to learn patience.
Yes.
And to allow time to sit in. So, speaking of time, I see that we are out of time. So I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks everybody for joining us. And for those of you listening after the fact, thank you for being here. And we hope to see you again soon.